Alright, so today we are studying the systemic embryology, development of the digestive system. Let's begin. As we speak, we have the diagram of the yolk sac, the amniotic cavity of the embryo. Alright, we have the diagram of the embryo here. Now, as we see, this is the amniotic cavity, this is the yolk sac, this is the cephalic end, this is the caudal end of the embryo. Okay, in the cephalic end we can see the endoderm, ectoderm. In the middle we see that there is ectoderm here, then there is endoderm here. This is the endoderm, this is the ectoderm, and in the middle we do have the mesoderm. Okay, now as we see here, we have from the endoderm we have the development of the digestive system, which forms the foregut, hindgut, and in the middle we have the midgut. Okay, so here if we talk about this, first we need to understand two things: that there is a oropharyngeal membrane here and in the cephalic end, and there is a cloacal membrane in the caudal end. The oropharyngeal membrane and the cloacal membrane, these two rupture and form the mouth opening, and here it forms the anal opening. The cloacal membrane, it is the membrane, cloacal membrane or cloacal membrane. This membrane, it is at the junction between the endoderm and the ectoderm. We'll understand later on about that. We have the diagram here, the cloacal membrane and the oropharyngeal membrane. Now, since we are talking about the embryology, let's talk about the things that develop from each layer. We could talk about that later, but let's talk about the development of the derivatives of endoderm. In the derivatives of endoderm, we have the gut tube endoderm. From the gut tube endoderm, we receive the GIT, the respiratory tract, the parenchyma of liver and pancreas, thyroid gland, tonsils. Okay. From the cloaca, part of the hindgut, cloaca is here. So the cloaca, we have the rectum, anal canal, urinary bladder, urethra, and other parts. Okay. We have pharyngeal pouches, from which we have auditory tubes, tympanic cavity, palatine tonsil, thymus gland, parathyroid gland, parafollicular cells or C cells of thyroid. These are boring stuff. What we need to discuss later on is that the rotation of the GIT. So the diagram that we need is this. This is the diagram. Okay, this is the diagram. The diagram, formation of the primitive gut, we have the foregut, midgut, and the hindgut. Okay, the foregut, it extends from the oropharyngeal membrane to the liver outgrowth. Okay, this is the extension of the foregut. From this part to the middle two-third, right two-third and left two-third junction, up to this junction, it's the midgut, and from there on till the cloacal membrane we have the hindgut. Okay, so within the digestive system we have two types of origins. From the endoderm, we have the lining epithelium of digestive tract and parenchyma of the glands. Lining epithelium and parenchyma. Okay, and from the visceral mesoderm, we receive the stroma, the muscle, the connective tissue of different glands or components of the wall of the gut. Okay, stroma of the glands and muscle connective tissue of the glands. So within the GIT, within the foregut, midgut and hindgut, we have the blood supply in a different case. So let's see the diagram of that. Probably this. Yes. No, not this one. No. Probably this. Yep. Yes. The celiac artery, it supplies the foregut. The superior mesenteric artery, it supplies the midgut. The inferior mesenteric artery, it supplies the hindgut up to the anal canal above the pectinate line. Okay, pectinate line. Now, rotation of the GIT. Rotation of the stomach. First, let's begin with the rotation of the stomach. Before we move on to the stomach, before the stomach, there comes the esophagus. Esophagus, it develops from the respiratory diverticulum or lung bud around the 4th week. Okay, and the stomach, it develops from the foregut around the 4th week. 4th week as a fusiform dilatation. This is fusiform dilatation. Okay, in close proximation to the respiratory diverticulum, right below the respiratory diverticulum. Okay. Now, rotation of the stomach, it occurs in 2 axes, one around the longitudinal axis and another around the anteroposterior axis. Okay, the anteroposterior axis. Along the longitudinal axis, it rotates 90 degree clockwise, and around the anteroposterior axis, the cephalic end or the cardiac portion, it goes to the left. It goes to the left and downwards, like this, and this goes to the right and upwards, So these are the 2 rotations. Why does this rotation occur? This rotation, this causes the formation of the greater curvature, and this occurs due to the faster and more rapid development of the left side of the stomach. Okay. Now, what's the proof that this rotation occurred? The proof is that while this tube is in this format or this position, this is the left vagus nerve, this is the right vagus nerve. When this GIT, this takes rotation, the right vagus nerve, it goes to the back, and the left vagus nerve, it comes to the front. So in that case, what happens is that the stomach, it is supplied at the front by the anterior vagal trunk and at the back by posterior vagal trunk. Okay, which in turn receives fibers from the right vagus nerve mostly, and anterior vagal trunk, it receives most fibers from left vagus nerve. Why is it called a trunk after the rotation? It's because when it's a nerve, it actually receives fibers from only one side, but when it becomes a trunk, it receives the fibers from other side as well. Okay, now during this rotation, if we look at this is the diagram which represents the dorsal mesogastrium and the ventral mesogastrium. The dorsal mesogastrium, it is derived from the dorsal mesentery. Okay, dorsal mesentery. This dorsal mesentery, it's a collection of connective tissues that maintains the gut tube and its derivatives in normal anatomical position. This dorsal mesentery, from this dorsal mesentery, the things that are derived are dorsal mesogastrium, greater omentum, mesoduodenum, mesentery proper, mesocolon, mesoappendix, mesosigmoid, basically the mesentery. And the ventral mesogastrium, from this we have the lesser omentum and the falciform ligament. Now, if we look at this diagram, we'll see that during the rotation of the GIT, the stomach is attached to the posterior body wall by the dorsal mesogastrium and the ventral body wall by the ventral mesogastrium. Now, due to the rotation and disproportionate growth of the stomach, the position of the dorsal and ventral mesogastrium is altered. This goes through a rotation. Now, rotation along the longitudinal axis. It pulls the dorsal mesogastrium to the left. Creating a space called the omental bursa. This place. Okay. Space called omental bursa. And as a result of the anteroposterior rotation, the dorsal mesogastrium bulges down. It bulges down and it continues to grow downwards as a double layered sac which covers the transverse colon and a small intestinal loop. This part is called the greater omentum. Okay, here it is bulging down. Okay, this is the omental bursa and it forms the greater omentum. Okay, now derivatives of the ventral mesogastrium is lesser omentum and falciform ligament. This is the ventral mesogastrium, and within the ventral mesogastrium the liver is developed, and this lesser omentum and the falciform ligament. Lesser omentum, it connects the stomach and proximal part of the intestine, proximal part of the duodenum with the liver, and the falciform ligament, it connects the liver to the ventral body wall. Okay, now this rotation that occurred, it caused the change within this cavity. Okay, now what is retroperitoneal and intraperitoneal? Intraperitoneal is that the viscera, it has peritoneum covered all around it. It has a relation of peritoneum around it. But in a retroperitoneal organ, it has peritoneal relation only at the front or anterior aspect, and the posterior aspect it does not. See, kidney, it only has peritoneal relation at the front but not at the back. Okay, now pancreas, this is an interesting organ because it is a secondary retroperitoneal organ. Why? At the beginning, it develops within the dorsal mesogastrium, but later on it becomes a retroperitoneal organ. It does not have any more peritoneal relation at the posterior aspect. That's why it's called the secondary retroperitoneal organ. Now we looked at the rotation of the GIT. We looked at the rotation of the mesogastrium. Okay, now let's move on with the development of duodenum. Duodenum, it develops from the terminal part of the foregut, then cephalic part of the midgut. Okay, and liver and gallbladder in the middle of the third week as an outgrowth of the endodermal epithelium at the distal end of the foregut. Okay, foregut একদম লাস্ট এই যে ডিস্টাল এন্ডে এসে we have the liver part or hepatic part. এখান থেকে parenchyma of the liver is originated. The capsule, the fibrous tissue, hemopoietic cells and the Kupffer cells, they are developed from the septum transversum. ঠিক আছে, septum transversum is here. What are the derivatives of septum transversum? Septum transversum থেকেই আসে হচ্ছে ventral mesentery বা ventral mesogastrium, and other things are falciform ligament, these other aspects that we talked about, the hemopoietic cells, the Kupffer cells, and also the lesser omentum. These are all derivatives of the septum transversus. Also the central tendon of the diaphragm, this is an important derivative. Now the pancreas develops from two buds, the dorsal pancreatic bud, the ventral pancreatic bud. The dorsal pancreatic bud and the ventral pancreatic bud, these together they form the pancreas. The distal part of the dorsal pancreatic bud and ventral pancreatic bud, the uncinate process and the inferior part of the pancreas, the uncinate process and the inferior part of the head of the pancreas, it is developed from the ventral pancreatic bud. The rest of the pancreas, it develops from the dorsal pancreatic bud. Okay, now what about the pancreatic ducts? The pancreatic ducts of the both buds, they fuse, and later on the main pancreatic bud, it is developed from the entire ventral pancreatic duct and distal part of the dorsal pancreatic duct. The accessory pancreatic duct, it is developed from the proximal part of the dorsal pancreatic duct. Now moving on to the midgut, as we talked about the development of duodenum up to the major papilla, it is developed from foregut. After the major papilla, below the major papilla, it is developed from the midgut. And the midgut, in the midgut we have the physiological herniation or primary intestinal loop. At the primary intestinal loop, the intestine, it exits the abdominal cavity temporarily, and ultimately it returns. It exits around, the herniation occurs around 6th week, and return occurs around 10th week. If we look at this diagram, this intestinal loop, it exits. While it exits, it does a 90-degree rotation. 90-degree rotation around the superior mesenteric artery. If we see, this is the superior mesenteric artery. The superior mesenteric artery acts as an axis. 90-degree first rotation, second rotation is 180-degree. So total 270-degree. 270-degree around the superior mesenteric artery. If the rotation does not occur, if the return does not occur, it is herniated but the retraction of the intestinal loop does not occur, then we have the umbilical hernia, congenital umbilical hernia. Now, why did this physiological herniation, or why did the intestine leave through the umbilicus? It's because when the liver grows and other aspects of the abdominal cavity, other organs, they start the development, and the intestine also starts development, there is not enough space within the abdominal cavity for the intestinal loops, so they herniate. This is what happens. That's the physiological herniation. Now, at this loop, we have a cecal bud. From this cecal bud, we have the development of appendix. And this cecal bud is the last part of the primary intestinal loop to enter, return the abdominal cavity. Now, at the loop, the apex, it remains connected to the yolk sac by bilirubin duct. The cephalic end, this is the cephalic end. This cephalic end, it forms the distal part of duodenum, jejunum, and part of ileum. And the caudal end, it forms the lower part of ileum, cecum, appendix, then ascending colon, proximal 2/3 of the transverse colon. Now, moving on, we have the hindgut. Now, here is the hindgut. This hindgut, it is divided into two parts by the allantois, to the pre-allantoic part and the post-allantoic part. This post-allantoic part, this is called the cloaca. What is cloaca? Cloaca, this is a cavity, endodermal lined cavity, covered at its ventral aspect by surface epithelium, surface ectoderm. This surface ectoderm and the junction between the barrier between the ectoderm and endoderm, this forms the cloacal membrane. Okay, the cloacal membrane. The rupture of the cloacal membrane, it forms two openings. One ventrally, one ventral opening for the urogenital sinus anteriorly. Okay, for the urogenital sinus anteriorly, and another anal opening for the hindgut posteriorly. Which creates the anal opening. Between these two anal openings, the tip of the urorectal septum, this is a wedge-shaped wedge of mesoderm which separates the region between urogenital sinus and the hindgut. This forms the urorectal septum. This forms the perineal bodies. Okay. Now, if we talk about the development up to the anal canal, and anal canal spectrinate line, it is formed by the endoderm of hindgut. hindgut. Now late after the pectinate line, it is formed by ectoderm, ectodermal proctodium, ectodermal proctodium. This ectodermal proctodium, this part, it is supplied by inferior rectal artery, which is a branch of internal pudendal artery. Because it's part of the ectoderm, it's developed from ectoderm, and above the pectinate line it is endoderm of hindgut. That's why it is supplied by inferior mesenteric artery, branch of inferior continuation of inferior mesenteric artery, which is inferior rectal artery. Okay, now that's pretty much it for the summary of development of digestive system. Okay, what we did not talk about is spleen. Spleen, it is a mesodermal proliferation in the dorsal mesogastrium. Let's look at this. Here, this is the dorsal mesogastrium. Here, mesodermal proliferation. We are done. Thank you.